Welcome to Just Three Workplace Gurus, a podcast about the real world of work. My name is Mike,
I'm Amy.
I'm Vivian.
and we are really lucky today to have a colleague and friend, Amina Moreau, join us to chat a little bit about the world of co-working, her evolution as a chronic entrepreneur, uh, founder and CEO of Radious, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that. Welcome, Amina.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're really glad to talk
I'm
to you.
excited for what I am sure is going to be a dynamic chat based on our initial intros.
So, why don't we dive in? Tell us a little bit about your history as an entrepreneur and what led you to Radius, and then we'll go into all kinds of topics related to the world of work.
Yeah, so Michael, I couldn't help but notice that you used the word chronic entrepreneur instead of serial entrepreneur.
Read that somewhere.
And yeah, I do think that's in my LinkedIn profile. I realized somewhere along the way that to choose this lifestyle repeatedly, you kind of need to be a little touched in the head. It's a bit
I'll second
masochistic,
that. Yes.
right? Uh, it was never in the life plan to be an entrepreneur. Frankly, I come from a family where you either become a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And so the path was carved for me. I was pre-med and I had the journey ahead of me until I did a side hustle. I was still in school. I did a side hustle with my then business partner, and it was simply turning a hobby into something that could monetize itself just enough so that we could do more of it. That was it. That was the goal. And we found ourselves with a business that was doing better than anybody had planned for.
Right.
I guess we had found something in the market that was needed. So we just did more of it. And by the time we were graduating,
Can we ask what that was?
yeah, it was a photography and filmmaking company.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Wow.
Okay.
Quite a pivot from pre-med.
Well, yeah, kind of. And, I actually have my dad to thank for it because he's the one that got me into photography as a hobby to begin with.
Got it.
And so it was a passion that we both shared as I was, growing up. And then when I decided to make some money at it, he was a little scared for me because, the whole starving artist trope. But I was still in school, so he just applauded that I was being industrious. But then when I told him, I think I might wait with grad school, I might wait with med school to go down this path, then he got a little scared. But the business was thriving, and we started getting international clients, and we were, it was self-sustaining, it was profitable. And eventually, because we started to become really ingrained in the market, we started seeing new gaps. And we're like, wait a minute, here's another gap in this niche. Why don't we start a side hustle to solve that?
A side hustle to the side hustle. I love it. Okay.
Exactly. Right. So you can see how it could quickly become, again, back to the disease analogy, it would become contagious.
Yeah.
And
Addictive,
so
I call it, but yeah.
the side hustle ended up becoming its own company, and then another one would roll out, and then another one would roll out. And so it ended up becoming a lifestyle that I never planned for, but it turned out that I loved. I realized that I'm built for it. And I think part of it is because I've been a competitive tennis player since I was 7. It instilled in me a certain fire, a certain independence, certain level of competitiveness, and maybe a hint of ego to, prove things to myself. And now, brings us to Radious, which is my 5th company.
Amazing.
And in a completely different field. And it's a love-hate relationship, but when you do something that you really believe in, it's easy to get up every morning and do it even when it's hard.
Yeah. I will share
what I find interesting.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Beth.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, when you said you saw a gap or you saw something missing, it that struck in my mind that that's something that you seek out, that you are one of those people who sees something missing and wants to go repair that, find a solution to that problem, which I think is really interesting and unique.
I don't think that's wrong. I'm not so sure that I actively go around
Right.
looking for things to solve, but when I'm in something and I notice that something is inefficient or it's holding people back in some way or there's an opportunity for improvement, I have a really hard time ignoring it.
Right.
And so yeah, and I'm also obsessive. That's the other thing. And again, like, I don't know if that's a good thing always. It certainly isn't conducive to balance, but it is conducive to passion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so when you find a
yeah.
problem or when it finds you and then you become obsessed with fixing it, I think I mean, hopefully that's how you make the world a better place over time.
Absolutely.
I think you're
Absolutely.
absolutely right, and that is a drive that I think many of us have. We may use it in different ways, but that
Yes.
desire to make things better, to improve
Yeah.
whatever you touch, I think is
And you
really
touched
important.
on the vision piece of it. You know, performance-based ergonomics was also an accident, never in the life plan. Bumped into it accidentally because I got injured at the piano. So I'm a trained concert pianist, and then
Oh, wow.
fixed my injuries and started seeing injured pianists come to my studio, and then that led me to their office because we couldn't figure out why they were still hurting when they were playing piano now beautifully with wonderful form and technique and blah blah blah. Um, but there was literally a like 2 a.m. like bolting up from my sleep with literally a vision of PBE, and I was like, I have to heal the hands of the world. Like, why me? Anyway, but it was this like weird like lighthouse that just sort of like steered. It morphed a million different ways. But anyway, so I think that's true, and I think no matter what your path is, like that thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, that thing that you're wanting to achieve, that thing that you're challenging yourself to do, is critical because I think otherwise work can be it's hard enough. I think that makes it even harder without that.
I was going to
It
ask you,
it is.
Amina, sorry, for in your advice to somebody who maybe is in a job right now, but does have that entrepreneurial side, but they're
Hmm.
not willing to, they're scared to take that risk. And I would
Yeah.
be curious from your perspective, what is it that really you would advise them to do to
Mm.
get started in that?
I would say that there are two things. Look, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, but you're in a 9 to 5 job, you can scratch that itch in a couple of ways. First, you can do a side hustle. Maybe you are passionate about something outside of work that you can start to monetize. One thing I would caution though is that sometimes when you monetize a hobby, you lose your passion for it. So be careful with that one.
Great point.
Very good point.
But thing, the second thing is that you can also be an intrapreneur at the company that you work for.
An
There's
entrepreneur.
likely
Oh,
nothing
good
stopping
one.
you from taking that entrepreneurial spirit and innovating within your role and maybe even expanding beyond
Hmm.
your role and showing to leadership that you're really thinking bigger and proving yourself as an asset in new ways. And so and those are just two ways. I'm sure that there are more, but there are ways to mitigate the risk of you don't have to just quit your job tomorrow and then just start from scratch with a new company. That's very risky and that's very scary, and not everybody even has the resources to be able to do
Right.
that, to just stop having an income for a
Like
while.
most of
So there
us.
are
Yes.
gradual ways to do it, but there are also ways to do it like within your permanent employment, I
Yeah.
believe.
That
That's
is
a
great.
brilliant
I like
answer.
that very much.
So I'm curious, pre-med, arts world, arts business world. Now tell us a little bit about Radius because I think the concept itself is phenomenal and we want our audience to hear about that, but just how that came about. And I think if I understand it, it came about during COVID too. So that's like a double whammy.
Yeah. Yes, Radious was a pandemic-born idea, and I half joke that the company is just a coping mechanism for me because during the lockdowns I was going nuts.
Yeah.
It was when the world is kind of burning around you, uh sometimes you don't know what to do. And you feel small and like your contributions are not going to be significant enough, and that can become depressing. And I was starting to feel that. But as we've established already, when there are problems, I tend to swoop in and try to solve them. And I think during the pandemic, I saw, certainly there were countless issues to be solved, but I saw one in particular, and I thought, if I put my heart and soul into solving this, it'll be a distraction from all of the bad things that are happening around me, and maybe it will give me a sense of purpose to try to improve something for others. So that's sort of the values backstory of how Radious came to be or why it did. But to take a quick step back, first and foremost, maybe it would be helpful for me to define what Radious actually is and what it does.
Yeah.
So basically, what we do is similar to an Airbnb type of model. We'll take residential properties, homes, apartments, guest house in your backyard, and we'll work with you to equip it with workplace amenities like whiteboard and maybe some AV for presentations, so that companies can then book that space for meetings, for co-working, for things like offsites, so that they don't necessarily have to lock themselves into a 5 or 10 year traditional office lease, and also have an environment that is homier, that is more unique than a typical corporate office. And that's also, I would say, pretty critically closer to home for people, because our big focus has been residential spaces because they're in residential areas. So this reduces commute times for people. And the way that this was born was in August of 2020. We're still technically in lockdown, and my partner and I are trying to figure out what to do with our Airbnb space that we had been renting out in 2019, and it had been generating some income for our family and covering part of our mortgage, and it was great. And then lockdowns happen, and we're like,
Uh-oh.
okay, so now we have this absence of income. But eventually, government regulations started to loosen, but we still didn't feel comfortable opening it back up for one main reason, and that was laundry. Because the idea of washing strangers' linens during a pandemic.
Love this.
Never thought about that.
That's really, that's kind of true.
And so we decided to keep it closed for the time being. But again, we were taking a hit financially. And so at one point in August, we sat down at the kitchen table and we started brainstorming. Is there a way for us to get back to hosting in a way that feels safe? And in that conversation, it occurred to us that, well, during the lockdowns, kids are home from school. Dogs are barking, the kids are screaming. How does a working parent get anything done at home?
They don't.
And we thought, well, what if we bought a sit-stand desk for that space? We upgraded the Wi-Fi and just invited our neighbors to come over and just work in solitude, because, this was pre-vaccines. It was safest to be in isolation at the time.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? So just come on over, get some peace for a few hours in our space, and then go home. And it's walking
But don't
distance
use the linens.
But
don't use the linens.
Exactly.
Why would you? Because you're just there for the day, right?
Hopefully not.
And so we're like, well, that's solved for us. And we kind of tested it, and people were using it. And then we started talking to other hosts in our community that had Airbnbs, and they're like, well, wait a minute. This day-only model actually eliminates a bunch of other pain points that Airbnbs have. And so it kind of opened our eyes to that. And then fast forward a little bit, when companies are starting to make headlines about permanent remote work, this is like in the fall of 2020, and they're getting rid of office space. And we're like, wait a minute. So we've been testing this out B2C in our neighborhood, but what if we experimented with B2B? Like, because teams are going to need something post pandemic, especially if they've gotten rid of their office space, because humans are social. Like, we're never not going to want to be in person ever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we started interviewing people in HR and other workplace roles and asking them, what do you anticipate your pain points being, especially post pandemic? And the biggest, most resounding response was in-person togetherness in groups. How are we going to get that in-person collaboration again? We need more privacy than a coffee shop or a typical co-working space. But we either don't have an office anymore, or our office is now too small to accommodate everyone. We want to put more emphasis into things like offsites for culture building, and we don't want to be in a stuffy hotel conference room.
Absolutely.
And that's really when we launched the platform. And we
Can
started pivoting our approach from like single person spaces to 5 to 10 to 15 person spaces to accommodate that. And so this is sort of a long-winded way of saying it was quite the evolution.
No, it sounds that way. And can I try something? I believe I can, for anybody viewing on video, I think I can share my screen just to show the website. Would you mind if I do that just to give our audience a kind of a taste of
please go ahead.
What this is?
I just pulled it up too.
Okay, so hopefully, I don't know if you guys can see it. Okay, great. Yeah, but I think this is absolutely brilliant. Radious, RADIOUS.PRO for anybody listening. And, you know, I love this. Affordable, inspiring workspaces right in your neighborhood. I mean, this is really, really quite something. And I love what you're saying, in person, like the team work days, the retreats, whatever you're going to use it for. And so I think this is brilliant. And so it sounds like this started super organically and then evolved and kind of you followed, it kind of told you what to do.
A little bit, yeah. And it's not so much that I was in search of a problem to solve, but I had a very personal problem that was affecting my family. And we just initially wanted to solve it for ourselves, and then realize that this could actually be very relevant for a lot of people. Of course, a two-sided marketplace like this, where you have customers on the supply side and then customers on the demand side that have completely different priorities, right? We've got people with properties, and then we have companies that want to book properties. And so you need two different marketing plans. You need two different sales teams, two different strategies, because it's basically like you're building two companies at the same time. And so you know, as somebody that likes problem solving, this is like the holy grail of problems, because when you're trying to build two companies at the same time, it's not easy. And you're constantly faced with something.
How big is your team?
What was your market strategy?
Sorry.
I was just going to ask what your market strategy is going after these different, you know, whether it's the people the owners of the property, or what were some of the things, like how did you go out and reach out to these different homeowners? And then how did you find some of these businesses?
Good question.
Yeah. It's really a chicken and egg problem, because in order to get the businesses interested in booking your spaces, you have to have some spaces.
Yeah.
But in order to get the spaces interested in listing with you, you have to have some demand for them.
Right.
So you have to start somewhere. So first of all, having interviewed companies to figure out if we even wanted to turn this into a business gave us enough connections to feel like if we did recruit some spaces, we would already have some customer interest to spend a few dollars to prove out the concept. So part of it was just having conversations, you know, building relationships, whether it was on LinkedIn or through word of mouth, getting referrals, introductions. And And we had already been talking to some Airbnb hosts in our hosting circles, and we'd garnered a little bit of interest that way already. And so it's about building a snowball first, like a little one, but then starting to roll it. And once it starts to roll, then you get those network effects, which two-sided marketplaces are known for. Because then what starts happening is the property owners who are getting all this business, they start marketing your platform for you and posting to social media with a link to their space to go and book, and they start singing your praises. And then likewise, the companies that are booking start saying, hey, we had a great experience at this particular Radious space, and it starts to build on itself. But two-sided marketplaces like this are notoriously difficult to initially spin up. They've got what's called a cold start problem times 2. So it took a lot of call it just grinding away, and then listening to what was resonating with people and experimenting with different messaging, and finally, like it's like taking feedback and then re-implementing that into the market.
And innovating, right? I mean, my team always like, they already know, and I'm like, oh, it'd be great. And they're like, oh no, here it comes. Somebody said, we're like a 20-year startup. I'm like, that's true. Because the world keeps changing.
But that's, and I love that. I really, really wish that more people would take on that mentality of thinking like a startup. There's this somewhat aged mantra now about, testing and iterating. That is what you do as a startup. But what if everybody did that all the time? Even the biggest, most established companies, if you can think like a startup in that way. And of course, you've got more red tape, and you've got inertia, which can slow down change. But that testing and iterating and constant, what in Toyota Kata they call continuous improvement, that's what moves the world forward. But it's also what creates resilience and agility. And in turbulent times, and when isn't it turbulent, right? I mean, we're seeing some market turbulence now, but when is it ever predictable? And so
never, really. That's an illusion, right?
You're gonna
that's a total illusion. And what is the famous adage? Necessity is the mother of invention. But I also feel like in our personal relationships and our work relationships, if we don't evolve and kind of lock into like, hey, this is working and this will always work, you're headed for bad times, I think. So I think being nimble, no matter what you do, entrepreneur, what that's a new word now we're going to adopt. But
I love that. I've got that written down.
No, but I think that's really, really important. And we don't stay the same, right? So anyhow, I just wanted to call that out.
Amina, 4 years in, how are you feeling about it? Is it like, what's it? Well, I guess I would ask this question. What's the typical experience for your clients now? What's that like? I've done it. I've been a part of it, so I've had the experience, but I'm curious what you think.
You've experienced it firsthand. Well, let me turn the question back on you. How did you feel about it?
Nice.
So my experience was that, without getting into too much detail, we had an organization that we both are familiar with here on the West Coast, sponsor an event there that included, I don't know how many we had, 40, 50 people, at a mutual
like
friend. At a mutual
friend. It was a larger group than we usually do.
Yes. And we were also recording what's called the mosh pit, which is available on YouTube. And so a lot of us were working in an office somewhere in the house, or working out on the patio, or working in the dining room, chatting in the kitchen. Then we did our hour-long recording. There was a lot of socializing. A few of us did end up sitting out on the patio with a few glasses of wine toward the end of the day, which was a lot of fun.
Around the bonfire.
Yes, right. It was a great day, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and became a huge advocate for what you're doing after having attended that.
And I'm curious, Michael, what stood out to you about that day and that experience and being in a residential property like that versus doing an event or an offsite at a hotel conference room or at a co-working space or anywhere else that's more, quote, traditional?
I think it's the feeling that you have a different environment. We're all
Mm,
moving to some degree in workplace. I know Amy will agree with me on this, to a more residential, more comfortable, less corporate feel in
yeah,
how we work and the
yeah,
activities that we do. And I think that really appealed to me. I should say, once or twice over the course of my career, I've had my team come to my home to
nice.
have a
It's a different
meal, to
feel.
sit at the dining table and work. And it is a different feel. And this is exactly that. I really like that. I thought it was a lot of fun. I will tell you a funny side story. I did come home and preach how wonderful this was to my wife, to which she said, "Yeah, we're not
No,
doing that in our house." That
you
for
said that.
her, that's
Right.
just challenging.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
don't want to have to worry about who's in the house and are the
Right.
restrooms clean and so
Sure.
forth. And totally get that.
Yep.
Well,
It's not
Yep.
for everybody on the provider side, but I think the
yeah.
experience of being in someone's home and doing all that was awesome. I loved it.
And I think
Well,
there's, I'm
that's a
sorry.
really interesting point too, because we recently did an analysis of our spaces and came up with some numbers because we were curious what percentage of our properties are lived in
Mm,
versus not.
Oh,
And
interesting.
about a third of our properties, like the one that you were at, a
Yeah,
third of them are lived in
interesting.
and typically are rented out when the family is out on vacation.
Ah,
Or maybe the 2 or 3 days that they go to the office, they rent out their space 9 to 5 to companies that want to use it. But 2/3 of our properties are second
mm,
homes or investment properties where they actually might be listed on other platforms as well, but when you rent them through Radious, you're guaranteed to have the workplace amenities and that
mm,
experience too.
right.
yeah,
And so you're absolutely right. Like, it's not, I don't think I would rent out my personal home, but that space that we have downstairs that was an Airbnb, absolutely. And that allows us to also supplement our income on weekdays because Airbnb is busiest on
right,
weekends.
right.
So
But
I
I
interesting.
do
like the
think that's
idea too of like, you don't want them in your home because you've got to clean, you've got to prepare,
Do the
you've got,
laundry, right?
maybe your personal artifacts, things like that.
yeah,
But having it as that second home, your rental property or your investment property is such a wonderful thing, right? You have your cleaning service that's going to come in. You don't, and going to some of these venues just makes it just more comfortable than a hotel,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
don't have servers walking around. You can maybe take
yeah.
your shoes off, or it's just a much more comfortable
Yeah.
ambiance
I
with
It
think
less
may
that's
be
true.
disruption.
this.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Viv.
I was going to say, of course, Mike and Amy know this is coming, but I know as somebody who lives in New York City, uh, either I'm on the road traveling, which is less and less and less and less for business since COVID. I'll say, hey, I'm coming to Los Angeles. I can meet you in person. It's okay. We could meet on Zoom. You don't want to come into the office, right? Anyhow, so that's been interesting. So my husband and I both work remotely the majority of the time in a very large, could be 2-bedroom apartment in New York City. We have to wake up and instead of saying, how are you? We go, what's your schedule? Right? Because we have to negotiate. Like, just before this, I said I'm recording the podcast. My husband's like, so I can't make my lunch. I'm like, nope. He's like, I can't walk by. I'm like, nope. Anyway, um, so he actually rents a co-working space in Manhattan so that members of his team, because they closed their office during COVID, and then they realized just how much of their budget was saved not having an office space in Manhattan, which is not cheap. So they do the co-working space. So sometimes I'm in the city and I can use it. And it's wonderful. But I have sampled many different co-working spaces across the country. And when there's a co-working space, you mentioned sit stand desk or good ergonomic chairs or just, the monitor I can plug into. is such a different story than when I go into a co-working space that ergonomically is not set up well, and I walk out, hunch shoulders, I'm uncomfortable, I never go back, right? Because, or the
Yeah.
acoustics are not right. Do you give advice to your hosts of, maybe this is something to add, just resources for them
Yeah.
to say, hey, don't just outfit the
Yeah.
whiteboard, but make sure things are adjustable, make sure you've got the lighting, make sure you, whatever, like this sort of a short list of the ergo things. If there's no
Yeah.
monitor, how about a
It
laptop riser or something, you know?
Yes. Yes. So we have resources for the absolute basics that you need to have in order to get
Right.
started with us. And then the how to take your space up a notch to either attract more customers
Mhm.
or to be able to charge a premium for it.
Sure.
And ergonomics are absolutely a part of that. In fact, we have a partnership with Miller Knoll that is fairly recent that offers discounted rates for beautiful ergonomic furniture
Nice.
for our hosts, so that when you're, say, at a dining table doing a meeting and you've got your whiteboard and you've got your AV, you're not sitting on
Typing like this.
wooden, hard
Right.
dining chairs, which are not designed to sit at for many hours at a time.
Right.
Right? You're sitting in something where you can be comfortable and you know that you're not slowly injuring yourself.
Exactly.
So things like that. And of course, you know, we're still a young company, so those partnerships are still growing. But we want people to feel a certain way
Mhm.
when they're in our spaces. And that's partly why we focused on the homey feel.
Mhm.
But it's not just about comfort, it's about health, it's
Of
about
course.
well-being.
Yeah.
And so ergonomics are a huge part of that.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I just had to. Sorry. But
Yeah.
anyhow,
Well, of
No, I think
course. I mean,
Vivian, you
right?
sound thrilled. She gave the right answer.
well, because a lot of the co-working spaces don't know about this, or they inherited some
Yeah.
furniture or whatever. But and then some of them boast
Yeah.
it as a feature. But and I just wanted to comment. There are a few sites. There's something called swimly.com, which is people renting out
Simply.
their swimming pools in their backyard. So
Yep.
we've had quite a few nice
Mhm.
parties in Los Angeles where my daughter and family live. Through this that you can rent by the hour, half day, party, etc. There's another one called musictravelers.com where people rent out musical spaces. And I've actually thought about hosting. We have a beautiful grand piano here, and rent it out by the hour. So these things, I think it's a win-win, right? It's a win for the person with the space or the asset. It's a win for the people looking, and it's very special. So
Yeah.
I was going to go back
I
to
think
the
it's a,
conversation about having people in your home because this is probably the social guy in me. But I liked the idea. I thought it would be cool, and I would actually want to be there. Like I'd want to be working in my
yeah.
office and have
and
other
have
people
pals.
using other. You both know me well enough to know I'm into this. Like, hey, have you got coffee? Are you all set? How's it going? I would
Yeah,
love
you'd
that.
be a
I wouldn't
great
want to do
host.
it every day.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it.
But I like that idea, and I love that there are different ways to do it, Amina, and that as you are growing, you're
Yeah.
seeing all these different kinds of applications,
Yes.
whether it's people
Yeah.
in their home or rentals or whatever. I think it's great. I like it a lot.
I think it's
And I
fantastic.
will say that most of the time, so look, there are different use cases for this product. Most of the time, when companies book a space for their team for a meeting or a presentation or some team building, they typically want total privacy. So they don't
Mm.
want the homeowner or
Yeah.
property manager to be there. But in the case of somebody who is extroverted and works from home most days of the week and wants to get out, we have a filter on our platform for shared spaces
Mm.
where it is implied that the host will be there
Right.
and that you're going to have some company or that you might have some company. And so if that's something that you're looking for, then you can find it. But you can also filter for completely private spaces for those teams who, they might be
Right.
talking about something sensitive,
Sure.
some
Of course. Of course.
IP
Of course.
or whatnot.
Right.
So that's really important. But one thing I'll add that I'm really proud of, actually, because I'm a bit of a tree hugger, a do-gooder, and something that really brings me a lot of joy about this platform is that it helps people with housing affordability in ways that overnight platforms struggle to. Because with Radious, you can rent your space out 9 to 5, but by 5:05 p.m. your guests are out of there,
It's your home.
and you can come home.
Right.
It's not like an overnight platform where you'd have to find a place for your whole family to sleep while you had bookings.
Right.
And so it allows people to monetize the very space that they live in if they want to, and make a little bit of side income in a way that they wouldn't really be able to unless they were renting out just one room on a platform like Airbnb. And we've actually had homeowners email us. I remember this one particular person who emailed me saying, I was able to make my mortgage payment because of the check that I got from Radious. I mean, times are tough for people.
That's
That's
very
been a
rewarding.
really heartwarming.
Well, and the idea too that you're driving through a neighborhood often where no one is there all day long because everybody's at work or school. Now we're using those spaces. They're not vacant spaces. Yeah. There you go. Parking. I think that's great. Amina, what do you feel is next? Like, I know as a chronic entrepreneur, what are you thinking about in the future? Are there areas you think you could move into with this? What's your
Fiji, Tahiti, take me there. I could use a vacation. How about that?
Fair.
There you go. Brilliant.
Where I work, we've actually officially defined the opportunity for employees to work from anywhere for a period of time. There are tax implications, etc. And so rather than be vague about it, we just told everybody, look, these are the countries you could work in. These are the implications. You need approval, but you can work for a month in all these places. And it's been really well received as a really great opportunity for people to get out there and try something different, be somewhere else for a while, which I love. I think it's great.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that there are a lot of governments around the world that are reducing those barriers because they recognize that it's going to elevate them on the world stage. And, the tax base is the workers, right? And so if you can attract the world's contributors to your country, to your state, to your city, to your province, whatever it is, and have them elevate your economy in that way, then everybody wins. So I'm very excited by this movement, and I'm very optimistic about it, despite some return to office mandate headlines and some companies trying to claw back remote and flexible work. It's important to recognize that the biggest companies have the biggest PR megaphones. So we're going to hear about those returns to the office more than we hear about the more agile companies continuing to offer flexibility. And they are also the ones that have the biggest real estate holdings. And so they have the most incentive to try to get people back as long as they're stuck with this brick and mortar structure. But what I'll predict is that over the next few years, as lease terms end, we're going to see a massive wave of lease non-renewals. It's hard to get out of a lease early.
Interesting.
But it's pretty simple to not renew one when it's ending. You just need to know what your next steps are. And so I am urging companies to start experimenting with new modes of not just working, but leadership, because it's not
very good.
You can't just, it's not a carbon copy of in-person 5-day in-office leadership that can just be pasted and applied to remote and flexible work. There needs to be some upskilling that goes along with it, and that takes time. And so use this time wisely.
Right.
I agree with you 100%. And That's an awesome place for us to wind down. Listen, thank
Yeah.
you so much,
Thank
Amina,
you
for
so
joining
much.
us.
This
This
has been
was
wonderful.
Yeah,
so much
thanks,
Yeah,
fun,
thank
Amina.
really
you.
interesting, dynamic conversation, and
Yeah.
we'll definitely love to talk to you again sometime soon. Thanks so much
Okay.
I'd
for
love that.
joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.